there's been all this talk about Boeing. I mean, when we flew to Costa Rica and back, we flew on Boeing aircraft. And on the way back, it was one of those MAX jets, and you know, we were all texting each other with jokes about, you know, are you near the window? Are you going to unfasten your seatbelt? Or don't be by the exit doors, and all this kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is that Donald Trump, and I don't know why the media doesn't ever mention this stuff, but in 2017, Donald Trump signed Executive Order 13771, which directed the Federal Aviation Administration to allow the airlines to self-certify their safety. So, like the 737 MAX, remember the two planes that crashed, killing hundreds and hundreds of people? And then they discovered it was a software glitch? That was self-certified. The FAA was not involved in that certification process the way that they traditionally had been because of this executive order with Donald Trump. He signed a second one on, let me get the date of the second one. I believe it was in 2019. I don't have the second one, but by the way, Joe Biden rescinded both of these on January 21st, his first day in office, 2021. But from 2017 until 2020, Boeing did not have to have the kind of federal safety inspections. They did not have to have the kind of disclosures that many argue could have prevented this. I mean, this is from an article at Forbes magazine. The headline at Forbes, did Trump executive orders further weaken FAA oversight? And they say certification of the flight control system on the Boeing 737 MAX is suspected to play a role in 2 deadly crashes. The FAA was acting within its policies and procedures by accepting Boeing's proof of the soundness of the system. Why? Because of Trump's executive orders. And again, back to and this is from Forbes, you know, capitalist tool. This is not some, you know, anti-Trump partisan rant. Quote, shortly after taking office, President Donald Trump signed Executive Order 1377. It was titled the Reducing Regulation and Controlling Regulatory Costs Order, requiring that the U.S. Department of Transportation actively identify and cut back on regulations deemed cumbersome or costly to business, and required the elimination of 2 or more regulations for every new regulation added. The mandate of this of a second executive order, 13777, which was titled Enforcing Regulatory Reform Agenda, was to start this effort immediately. So his first his first executive order said, you know, just let Boeing tell you if everything's good, and that should be enough. And his second executive order said, and you damn well better start right now, in 2017. So again, back to Forbes magazine. This move may have tipped the balance, with the FAA forced to put the interests of business ahead of aviation safety. By June of 2017, the group, and they're talking about an airline safety group, ARAC, an organization of airlines that looks at airline safety. By June of 2017, the group had compiled 150 pages with over 300 suggestions of potential regulations that could be pulled off the books. So, you wonder why planes, Boeing planes specifically, are falling out of the sky? I mean, apparently not so much anymore, but were. You can thank Donald Trump and the right-wingers. And like I said, Joe Biden reversed that his first full day in office. Another problem we have is that President Biden is trying to reduce the cost of pharmaceutical drugs. We pay, in some cases, 10 times more for pharmaceuticals than people in Canada or in Europe or any other developed country in the world. I mean, literally 10 times more. It costs a bloody fortune to buy drugs in the United States, pharmaceuticals. And so, you know, there has been an effort. Joe Biden succeeded in getting 10 drugs reduced in cost for Medicare recipients. Originally, it was supposed to be for everybody, but he couldn't get that past the House, the Senate, the Republicans, and these 4 sellout Democrats. And now he's got this new effort where he's trying to expand that to all drugs and to all people, not just people over 65. The $35 insulin as well, by the way, which costs about 10 cents a dose to manufacture. And this is from Lever News, David Sirota's piece. It's by Helen Santoro. And she writes, Democratic Representatives Scott Peters of California, Wiley Nickel of North Carolina, Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey, and Donald Davis of North Carolina are each sponsoring at least one of several proposed bills that would limit regulators' ability to negotiate down prices of drugs covered by Medicare. The legislation would erode the drug pricing reforms included in the Democrats' 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. Now, of course, all the Republicans are on board with this. They want us to continue getting screwed because the pharmaceutical companies kick back contributions to them. And we've known for some time that Josh Gottheimer, is one of the more corrupt Democrats. I think he's the head of the Problem Solvers Caucus, this bipartisan group of people who take money from big companies and do whatever they want. But Wiley Nickel of North Carolina, Scott Peters, I knew, was also fairly corrupt. We've got some real problems with at least 4 of our Democrats, and Donald Davis of North Carolina, who I'd never heard of before. But they're all 4 of these people are sponsoring legislation to let the pharmaceutical companies go back to screwing us to the extent that they have been, regulated. The other thing is pharma's secret middlemen. This started out years ago. They're called pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs. And these people, or these companies that these people work for, these PBM companies, were originally supposed to, if you owned a pharmacy and there's a giant drug company out there, if you're just one little retail pharmacist, you can't negotiate, good discounts with the big drug companies. So the PBMs came in and said, listen, we'll negotiate on your behalf. And they actually got, laws created that kind of physically inserted them or legally inserted them in the middle of this process. Well, what's happened now is that the big insurance companies and the big drug companies have bought up all the PBMs. And so the PBMs now are jacking up prices. Instead of negotiating lower prices, they're now negotiating higher prices. They're screwing us terribly. And so this from Lever News, again, this David Sirota's piece by the same author, Helen Santoro. She writes, lawmakers from both parties and 39 state attorneys general joined forces to stop the shadowy corporate middlemen behind rising drug prices and the death of independent pharmacies. Now these reform efforts are in peril following nearly $50 million in industry lobbying, including tens of thousands to members of Congress who sponsored that the original reform legislation. You can thank Clarence Thomas for this, by the way. He was the deciding vote, the tie-breaking vote in Citizens United, which allows this kind of bribery. She goes on to note, lawmakers from both parties have introduced more than 20 federal bills to curb these companies, these PBMs, power. And late last month, more than 3/4 of the nation's state attorney generals sent a letter to Congress urging action on them. Now, this is all on behalf of getting rid of the pharmacy benefit managers, or at least preventing them from screwing us. But days after the letter, it was revealed that Congress may not include any of the reforms in the next federal reform. This comes after PBMs spent a combined $47 million in lobbying last year. So, just a heads up on what's going on in Congress. And like I said, were it not for Clarence Thomas and 4 other right-wing Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court in 2010, none of this would be legal, or at least only parts of it would be legal. I mean, we had some real serious reforms in 1974 and 1975 after the Nixon and Agnew bribery scandals and Watergate and all that kind of stuff. And the Supreme Court began gutting them in the late 70s and really went to town in 2010.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I'll be right back with a video that you have got to see or hear, and your calls. So stay tuned.